And how is that? I mean, how do you see as your approach is significantly different than the usual way that therapists work with autistic people, so-called autistic people?
So, at the center where I work, they definitely use pictograms a lot and sequences to help them understand what you want from them. So they already are using some of the visual thinking.
Yeah.
Um, but instead of approaching them verbally, the first thing I do when I meet a client for the first time is to ask them about their passions and to show me. I tell them, show me what you like. Just go to internet and show me references. Show me the video games or the movies or the whatever it is that you're passionate about. And then I propose them, like I typically start with Photoshop, and I prepare like a kind of project that uses these references so that they can be intrinsically motivated. And this, I found that this works really well. Generally, it's really hard to get their attention if you are not working within their realm of interests.
Yeah.
And it's also about building that trust, understanding that you're not an intruder in their world, that you want to share and that you want to give them that space for them to express themselves visually or by through creation, right? Building something in Photoshop or yeah.
As you did the project, what changed? What changed in the way you were doing it, and what changed in your relationship to it and to the clients?
Well, the one thing that I think that changed was that as I started the project, I had in mind that this was targeting high functioning people on the spectrum. I thought it was natural just because in order to be able to work to a certain level in the multimedia field, you need to have a certain cognitive level. But what I found, so in the end, instead of doing just like, engaging visual, high functioning individuals in the spectrum, like I ended up saying engaging visual thinkers. And that these are all kinds of levels. And for me, the realization that these kinds of interventions also has an impact or have a positive impact in those that are like lower levels and that need more support.
Mhm.
Uh, you just have to adapt to the kinds of exercises you're proposing to them. And yeah, so what changed in the way I related to them? I went there with the expectation of I had never worked with autism before. I had read a lot about autism, and so I went there with like hoping to get to know each individual little by little and gradually. And what changed is that we created a relationship, a unique one, like I say in the presentation. Each relationship is different, in each case study because they have different needs and different ways of expression. So I just adapted to them. So I learned to recognize their needs in context, and
What
that
were
was
the
very helpful.
what were the obstacles that you met along the way, and how did you deal with them?
Well, working with autism is full of obstacles because, again, it's very hard. It's really hard to get them pay attention or to be concentrated and focused while you're teaching them. Uh, so working through their affinities is a great way. But then they may. So one of the obstacles, very clearly, for those that are in the middle of the spectrum, autonomy is a big difficulty. You have to guide them step by step, or at least that's what I found. They lack autonomy and they need you to guide them step by step, literally. You take the mouse, you click in this icon, and you make this selection in this way, and then they can repeat. And there has been progress over the course of several years, but it's really hard for them to apply something that they've learned in a different context. If it's
Mhm.
not if it's not the exact same exercise, they have a hard time translating it into a different exercise.
Yeah, that's
So that's
interesting.
a difficulty. Another difficulty, social skills. Social skills is the biggest difficulty that I see all over the spectrum. But for those that are high functioning, one of them, I've illustrated these two cases because I thought it was very interesting. Leo is incredibly extroverted and talks. He can speak for hours about his passions, but he doesn't realize if the other person is interested, and he doesn't reciprocate. He doesn't turn and say, so how are you? What are you up to this week? While Irene is she would avoid speaking if possible. Now her artwork is incredibly expressive, and she's able to be very eloquent when she wants to, when she's talking about her projects and her passions. She loves animals and nature and landscapes. So when it is about her world, she will, and in a space where there is trust, and she knows you and you know her, and eventually over time, she is able to reveal more of herself. But she struggles, yeah, with social interaction. And also, there are multiple difficulties. But she is very, very good at what she does. So another difficulty that she has, another high functioning on the spectrum that are incredibly smart, is that they can be arrogant at times. They can be intolerant. So if we want society and the work environment to be tolerant with them, they also have to learn to be tolerant with typical people. So it's both ways. Yeah. So
I'm
I can
interested.
keep on working for hours. I mean, talking for hours about like their struggles and difficulties, and on the other side of the spectrum, because so if we're talking about, for instance, field that does not have verbal competency or very 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 basic, he gets frustrated and he grabs you and leaves bruises on you because he's not able to express what he needs.
Mhm.
So that is also a big struggle that you have to deal with and say, no, this is not acceptable. You cannot do that. You can express it in this other way. But yeah, depending on the client, different struggles.
Did you find that your way of working changed as you got more into it?
I somehow went in there not knowing how I was going to work.
Mhm.
I knew that I wanted to work with visual arts interventions, and that I had a series of tools. A tool for video editing, a tool for image, like uh, editing images, and a tool for 3D animation and modeling. And depending on the client and their interests and competencies, I would offer one thing or the other. And it was a trial error situation where was it accepted and they would be more interested. We would continue working on that. And there were dynamics that showed up, like the one that I've shared in the presentation about this co-creating of artwork, where we are working in parallel. I'm sharing my screen because with this particular client, Irene, I'm working on Skype. She is confined, or she was confined anyways, at home. That this dynamic we discovered somehow I found out that this was something that was very helpful to her. Like just to have that space of creation, we wouldn't even talk. We would be painting, both of us. And at the end, so at the beginning of the session, we would establish a certain direction. So I would ask her, "Do you have anything in mind? Do you have anything that you've been reading or you've seen this week? Any reference about a subject?" She typically would say no. Sometimes she would propose something. So if she didn't have an idea and I didn't have either, we would just go find references online and we would just download them into a shared folder. And then we would just spend a couple of minutes looking at them and seeing what's remarkable or highlighted in these different pictures, and if there is a connecting theme. And then I would just say, what do you think about doing something that has a lot of contrast, illumination, it's at night, or a landscape? And she would say yes, and we would start. And at the end of the session, I would show, well, she's been seeing the process over the whole session, but at the same at the end of the session, I tell her what my process has been like, and then I invite her to share about her process.
Mhm.
And at the beginning, she was very, very concise, and it's really hard for her to share. To just share her drawing, for me, it was always a surprise. I would just see what she had done, and I was like, typically wowed, because she's very talented. And I also saw this communication where she would take elements that I had integrated in my piece, and then the next day I thought that she had a great idea, and I wanted to integrate it in mine. And so a piece of work would take maybe several sessions, but little by little and gradually she came to be able to express more about the technique or what if there was difficulty while creating it, like, little by little.
It sounds to me like you had to have a lot of faith in the process in order to keep going with this.
Indeed, yes.
Crazy
Yes,
to,
there were moments that I thought, am I contributing anything? I mean, I'm painting and she's painting, and because as a neurotypical, you expect an interaction that's more dynamic and back and forth, and this is just both in parallel. But for her, it was not only enough, but she missed. So there is an anecdote that really made me realize that this was important to her. So we had been doing digital painting for a year and a half or so, and at some point she said, I'm ready to start with 3D modeling. So we shifted, and instead of using Photoshop with a tablet, we started working on Maya 2 days per week. And then a month and a half later, she wrote an email to me saying that she really missed our painting sessions and that she hadn't been able to paint anything since we had started with Maya. And she was proposing to add one more session in the middle of the week to do that. And I was like, wow, okay. Yes, of course. Let's do it. Like, I didn't know that this was so positive for you, but and for her to express a need like that, when she typically, I mean, she's really hard to decode. She's not very expressive. So as I am interacting with her and trying to do my best, I never know. At the beginning, I didn't know. Later, I learned to know her a little bit more. But at the beginning, I just didn't know if she was okay with it, if she liked it. I knew that she would come back every session. She was very punctual and she never missed a session. She was one of my most faithful clients. And then she was able to express that by email.
it sounds like the relational aspect of your work became more and more clear to you as you went along. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. Each individual has their own way, and it does require more time than with a typical person. I mean, typical people are also very diverse,
Right.
but for people on the spectrum, those that are very introverted, or it takes a longer time to reach them, also because they can't cope with too much questioning. They shut
Shut
down.
down.
They withdraw. It's like, I don't know. She would typically say, I don't know. Now the other guy, Leo, he loves questions. He just wants me to keep on asking so he can continue talking about his projects. Again, different people, different ways, but definitely in the case of Leo, for instance, he also now, after 4 years of working together, now it looks more like therapy than it was at the beginning. At the
Uh,
beginning, it was more like teaching him and giving him that space for him to talk about his project, which is therapeutic per se. But now he's talking about his social skills difficulties in our sessions, and then we go into creating.
mhm.
So we've gained that trust and that relationship. Yeah.
Well, I think I want to pass on to the other members of the committee, but I find it fascinating what you're doing, and particularly the care with which you attend to each person in their own terms. I think that is so important, and not always typical. I mean, people want to have a formula, they want to know how to do it, and they want to apply the same way to everybody, and it doesn't work.
That is the one thing that it's not so easy to generalize. And the only thing that I can come up with generalizing is the idea of developing sensitivities to work with these people.
High sensitivity. Yeah.
Yeah, high sensitivity, high sensitivity indeed.
Thank you very much, Ellen. I'll pass it
Thank
back.
you, Stephen.
You're welcome.